The sharp, shattering sound of fine crystal breaking against expensive hardwood floors echoed through the massive dining room, instantly killing the soft jazz music playing quietly in the background. The expensive red wine, a vintage bottle I had paid for just hours earlier, splashed across the pristine oak planks. It pooled like dark blood near the edge of the imported Persian rug. For a split second, nobody in the room dared to breathe. The lively chatter of our extended family died in their throats. My mother, Una, stood at the head of the long mahogany table. She did not look down at the catastrophic mess she had just made by carelessly sweeping her arm across the table while telling a wildly exaggerated story about her latest country club luncheon. Instead, her cold, piercing eyes locked directly onto me. She reached over to the marble sideboard, grabbed a damp, dirty dish rag that the caterers had left behind, and threw it hard across the space between us. It sailed through the air and hit my chest with a wet thud, dropping into my lap and instantly staining my simple, beige silk blouse with gray dishwater. "Scrub my floors right now or get out," she hissed. Her voice dripped with such intense venom that it felt like a physical blow to my face. She did not ask the hired help. She did not ask my sister, Veda, who was sitting right next to her, casually adjusting the brightness on her phone screen to film an Instagram story of the ruined dinner party. My mother looked at me, her 35-year-old daughter, the one who had funded this entire lavish evening from the appetizers to the valet parking, and spoke to me as if I were a stray animal she had caught digging through her garbage cans. The sheer humiliation of the moment was suffocating. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. I could feel the eyes of my aunts, uncles, and cousins burning into the side of my face. None of them said a word. None of them came to my defense. They just stared, waiting for the inevitable. My mother expected me to slide out of my heavy dining chair, get down on my hands and knees in front of our entire extended family, and wipe up her mess while she watched from above. She expected me to do it because I had always done it. I was the designated punching bag of this toxic family. I was the invisible ATM. I was the dutiful, broken daughter who would swallow any amount of poison just to keep the peace. If I refused, I would face the wrath of a narcissistic mother and lose the only family I had. If I stayed and got on my knees, I would lose whatever tiny shred of human dignity I had left in my soul. I looked down at the dark red puddle seeping into the expensive wood grain. I looked over at Veda, who let out a soft, mocking snicker, her eyes still glued to her phone screen as she typed out a caption. And then I looked back at my mother's face. She was smirking. She was enjoying this display of power. There were no tears in my eyes. There was no sudden burst of rage. I did not scream. I did not throw my plate against the wall. Instead, an eerie, freezing clarity washed over my entire body. It was a profound awakening. I slowly stood up from the chair. The wooden legs scraped against the floor, sounding like a gunshot in the silent room. I picked up the dirty, wet rag from my lap. I folded it neatly into a square and placed it on the table right next to my untouched plate of expensive steak. I grabbed my purse from the back of the chair, turned my back on the woman who gave birth to me, and began walking toward the grand front double doors. "Oh, let her go," I heard my mother sneer loudly behind me, making sure her voice rang out for every single guest to hear. "She will be crawling back to apologize by tomorrow morning. She always does." Her laughter echoed down the hallway. It was a cruel, dismissive sound that had haunted my entire childhood. But she was wrong. I was never coming back. And by the time she realized exactly what my silent departure meant, her entire fake, luxurious world would burn to the ground. Have you ever wondered what happens when the family scapegoat finally stops playing the rigged game? Well, let me tell you exactly how I dismantled my toxic family's life, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. The drive back to my modest apartment on the other side of the city was a blur of neon streetlights and suffocating silence. I did not turn on the radio. I gripped the leather steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, replaying that specific moment over and over in my head. The way she threw that rag. The staggering entitlement. The way she assumed she owned my soul. For 35 years, I had been trapped in a twisted, psychological web of family drama and manipulation. Una was a master manipulator, a woman who cared infinitely more about how she appeared to her wealthy friends than she did about the well-being of her own flesh and blood. Unless, of course, that flesh and blood was Veda. Veda was the golden child. For years younger than me, stunningly beautiful and utterly useless in the real world. While I spent my entire 20s working grueling 80-hour weeks, building a massive career in wealth management, Veda was busy finding herself on spiritual yoga retreats in Bali, funded entirely by the Bank of Mom. But the dark secret of this family was that the Bank of Mom was actually just me. I was the one funneling thousands of dollars into Una's checking accounts every single month, so she could maintain the grand illusion of high society wealth. I parked my car in the dimly lit basement of my plain, unassuming apartment building. I walked into my living room, threw my keys onto the counter, sat on my generic gray sofa, and stared at the blank white wall. I thought about the sheer audacity of my mother. She truly believed I would come back begging for her forgiveness because I was terrified of being abandoned. She thought she held all the cards. She thought she had all the power. She had no idea that I held the keys to her entire existence. I paid for her food. I paid for her cars. I paid for the very roof over her head. How did it get this bad? How did I let them treat me like a worthless servant while I financed their luxury lifestyle? I closed my eyes and let the memories flood in. It was time to face the truth. I spent the rest of that night wide awake, wandering through the dark museum of pain inside my own mind. Every exhibit was a vivid memory of their cruelty and my own foolish, desperate loyalty. I could not sleep. The adrenaline mixed with years of suppressed resentment kept my heart racing. I walked over to the old metal filing cabinet in my home office and pulled open the bottom drawer. I reached into a folder labeled Past and pulled out a faded, yellowing piece of paper. It was an electric bill from 17 years ago. I was 18 years old at the time. I had just gotten my very first minimum wage job waiting tables at a greasy local diner downtown. I worked closing shifts, coming home smelling like old cooking oil and stale coffee. The very week I received my first meager paycheck, Una marched into my bedroom and handed me this exact bill. She put on her best tragic face. She told me times were incredibly tough, that she was struggling to keep the lights on for us, and that as an adult living under her roof, I needed to step up and carry the weight. I handed over my entire paycheck without a second thought. I felt proud. I felt like I was finally earning her love by helping my mother survive. But 2 days later, I stood by the living room window and watched as a brand new, cherry red convertible pulled into our concrete driveway. It was a surprise birthday gift for Veda's sweet 16. The giant white bow on the hood gleamed in the sunlight. While I was scrubbing hardened grease off diner tables until my hands bled just to pay for our electricity, my mother was taking out predatory, high-interest loans to buy my spoiled sister a luxury sports car. When I confronted her that evening, my voice trembling with betrayal, Una immediately started crying. She twisted the narrative flawlessly. She told me I was selfish. She said Veda needed a safe car for school and that I was trying to ruin my sister's special day out of pure jealousy. She made me feel like a monster for asking why my money went to a light bill while Veda got a sports car. I ended up apologizing to her. I actually apologized for being upset. I placed the faded electric bill on my desk and pulled out another thick stack of documents. My student loan consolidation paperwork. When it was time for me to go to college, Una sat me down at the kitchen table and told me there was simply no money left. She said I was smart and highly capable, and that taking out heavy student loans would build my character and teach me responsibility. So, I took on massive debt. I worked night shifts at the university library, eating cheap instant noodles and sleeping 3 hours a night to survive the grueling academic years. I graduated with top honors and $80,000 in crushing debt. The exact same year I walked across the stage to get my diploma, Veda decided she did not want to go to a local college. She wanted to study art history in Paris. Suddenly, miraculously, Una found the money. She drained her remaining savings and quietly remortgaged the house to send Veda on a lavish European vacation, disguised as a higher education. I remember sitting in my tiny, unheated apartment, looking at Veda's social media posts. She was eating croissants near the Eiffel Tower, buying designer clothes, and drinking expensive wine. Veda dropped out of the program after 3 short months because it was too stressful, but my crippling debt remained. I spent a decade aggressively paying off those loans, sacrificing vacations, nice clothes, and a social life, while Veda floated aimlessly from one expensive hobby to the next. And then I pulled out the third document. The most recent one. The heavy, formal lease agreement for the massive, 5-bedroom luxury estate in the hills where Una and Veda currently lived. A few years ago, Una came to my apartment weeping hysterically. She claimed she had made a terrible financial investment, that the bank was going to foreclose on her old house, and that she and Veda would be out on the streets. She clutched her chest, faking heart palpitations, and begged me to help them. She said her health was failing rapidly, and she just needed a safe, quiet place to live out her years. Like the pathetic, desperate daughter I was, still chasing that elusive maternal approval, I swooped in to save the day. I didn't just rent them a nice apartment. I used my financial knowledge to set up a private limited liability company. I bought that sprawling, multi-million-dollar estate outright and let them live there under a phantom lease. I did this so Una could tell her snobby country club friends she was renting from an exclusive, private overseas investor. I paid the massive property taxes. I paid the monthly maintenance. I even paid for the professional landscaping team so Una wouldn't have to lift a single manicured finger to pull a weed. I looked around my small, 1-bedroom apartment. The walls were bare. I wore clothes purchased from discount clearance racks. I drove a reliable, 5-year-old sedan that blended into traffic. To the outside world, and especially to my mother and sister, I was just a boring, middle-class financial worker who scraped by on a meager salary. They constantly mocked my cheap shoes. Veda frequently made snide, passive-aggressive remarks about my lack of fashion sense and my boring lifestyle. They viewed my constant financial contributions as a meager offering, a basic tax I owed them for the privilege of being allowed in their presence. They thought I was weak. They thought I was poor. They thought I was trapped. But they were wrong on all counts. They had no idea who they were actually dealing with. Have you ever felt like you are just a ghost in your own family, only summoned when they need a massive favor or someone to blame? Let me know in the comments below, because what I discovered on my computer that very night was the final spark that blew my toxic family to pieces. The deeply ironic truth about my existence was something Una and Veda were far too self-absorbed to ever notice. I didn't just work a standard 9-to-5 job at a wealth management firm. I was a senior portfolio manager. Over the past 15 years, while they were busy buying designer handbags, leasing luxury cars they could not afford, and popping expensive champagne at exclusive Sunday brunches, I was quietly and aggressively investing. I lived well below my means on purpose. I funneled every single spare cent I earned into the stock market, real estate ventures, and high-yield index funds. My net worth was not a few $1,000s sitting in a savings account. My actual net worth was north of $6 million. And $2 million of that was highly liquid cash, sitting securely in private accounts they knew absolutely nothing about. I kept my immense wealth hidden for one very specific reason. I knew exactly what would happen if Una ever found out. She would bleed me dry. She would demand access to it, claiming it was her divine right as a mother to share in my financial success. She would guilt-trip me, manipulate me, and drain every account to fund Veda's delusions of grandeur. So, I played the part of the struggling, dutiful, boring daughter. I gave them just enough money to keep them afloat, falsely believing that my financial support was a valid substitute for the maternal love I so desperately craved. As I sat in the suffocating quiet of my apartment, letting the humiliation of the dinner party wash over me, my cell phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up the dark room. It was an automated email alert from a premium credit monitoring service I subscribed to. I frowned, picking up the phone and opening the secure message. My heart skipped a beat. My flawless credit score had taken a sudden, massive dip. I quickly logged into the secure financial portal on my laptop, my eyes frantically scanning the detailed report. And then I saw it. The blood drained from my face, and a cold sweat broke out across my neck. There it was, sitting right at the top of the page. A premium, high-limit travel credit card had been opened in my name exactly 3 months ago. The current outstanding balance was $50,000. My heart pounded furiously against my ribs, sounding like a war drum in my ears. I clicked on the transaction history, my hands shaking with a mixture of shock and boiling rage. The charges read like a luxury vacation itinerary. 2 first-class plane tickets to Milan. 5-star boutique hotel stays in Italy. Thousands of dollars spent at high-end designer stores. Exorbitant restaurant bills. And the most recent charge, processed just 2 days ago, a vintage, limited edition designer handbag. It was the exact same handbag that Veda had been proudly showing off at the dinner table tonight. Una had stolen my identity. She had somehow taken my social security number, forged my signature electronically, and maxed out a secret credit card under my name to fund Veda's extravagant European shopping spree. She didn't even ask to borrow the money. She just took it. She committed a severe felony, assuming I would never monitor my credit closely enough to find out. Or worse, she assumed that if I did find out, I would just quietly pay off the massive debt to avoid a messy family scandal and protect her from the law. The very last string connecting my heart to my family snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break. It was a silent, irreversible severing of all emotional ties. I didn't feel sad anymore. I didn't feel the crushing guilt that usually dictated my actions. All the years of hoping for a mother's warm embrace, all the desperate attempts to buy their affection with my hard-earned money, evaporated into the cold night air. They were not my family. They were parasites. And it was time to forcefully cut the host off. I stared at the glowing laptop screen, the $50,000 debt mocking me in bold black numbers. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow. I went to work. I spent the next 4 hours sitting at my desk, organizing encrypted digital folders, pulling property deeds, checking international account balances, and formulating a strategy that was so ruthlessly efficient. It would leave them spinning in a void of poverty. I wasn't just going to stop answering their phone calls. I was going to systematically dismantle the foundation of their entire fake world. I was going to take back every single thing that legally belonged to me. The rage inside me had crystallized into pure, focused determination. They wanted me to clean their mess? Fine. I was going to wipe them completely off my map. The morning sun filtered through my cheap plastic blinds, but I was already dressed and ready to initiate a war. I did not put on my usual discount clothing. I wore my sharpest, most expensive tailored suit, the dark navy one I strictly reserved for closing major client acquisitions. I put on a pair of designer heels I had hidden in the back of my closet for years. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in my life, I did not see Una's scapegoat. I saw a multi-millionaire who was about to collect her debts. I drove straight to the sleek, towering glass-paneled building in the heart of the financial district where Jareth worked. Jareth was my personal wealth manager, a fierce and brilliant attorney, and one of the very few people on earth who knew exactly how much money I truly possessed. He was a corporate shark in a tailored suit, but he had always been fiercely protective of me, often advising me to cut my family loose years ago. I walked past his startled receptionist, ignoring her polite greeting, and pushed straight into his massive corner office. He looked up from his dual monitors, clearly surprised by my intense, unannounced arrival. Blythe. Good morning. What brings you in so early? He asked, his eyes narrowing as he noted the cold, dead expression on my face. I walked over, sat down in the heavy leather chair across from him, and slid a printed copy of the credit report directly across his mahogany desk. I need you to look at this right now. Jareth picked up the paper, his eyes quickly scanning the numbers. His brow furrowed deeply, and then his head shot up in disbelief. $50,000 in 3 months? On a premium card you never authorized? Blythe, this is severe identity theft. We need to freeze this account immediately and file a police report. Do you have any idea who did this to you? My mother, I said, my voice completely devoid of any human emotion. It sounded like a machine speaking. Jareth froze. He slowly lowered the paper and looked at me. He knew all about my toxic family. He knew about the phantom lease on the massive estate, The monthly allowance I silently funneled to them, the constant, exhausting financial rescuing I did. Blythe, Jareth said, leaning forward, his voice lowering to a serious, urgent tone. They are not just taking advantage of your kindness anymore. They are crossing legal lines. They are draining your blood. What do you want to do about this? Everything, I replied, staring unblinking into his eyes. I want to cut the cord. All of it. Today. Jareth sat back in his large chair, a slow, predatory smile forming on his lips. He had been waiting for this day for years. Define everything. First, the credit card. Report it as fraud to the bank immediately. I am not paying a single cent of that $50,000. If the bank's fraud department traces the IP address and the shipping addresses back to Una's house, that is her problem. She committed a federal crime. Let her face the legal consequences. Do not protect her. Jareth nodded, already typing rapidly on his keyboard. Done. The bank will launch a full investigation by the end of the day. What else? Close the joint checking account I used to funnel her monthly allowance. Drain it to zero. Reroute all my personal funds, specifically the $2 million in liquid cash, into an offshore account. I don't want a single penny accessible in this country for the time being. Make sure they cannot touch a dime. Moving the cash is easy. It will be secure and untraceable by noon, Jareth said, his fingers flying across the keys with lethal speed. What about the estate? The house they live in? I turned my head and looked out the massive window at the bustling city traffic far below. The estate is owned entirely by my LLC. Una thinks she has a rock-solid, long-term lease. She doesn't. Her lease is legally month to month, and she has missed the phantom rent payments for the last 24 months because I was quietly covering them behind the scenes to keep the LLC balanced. I want that house listed for sale. Right now. I want it sold to a cash buyer, and I don't care if we have to take a slight loss on the market value to move it quickly. Issue a formal 30-day notice to vacate to the residents. Jareth stopped typing. He looked at me with a profound mixture of awe and deep respect. You are selling the house right out from under them? Blythe, when they wake up and get that eviction notice pinned to their door, it is going to be an absolute bloodbath. Let it bleed, I said softly, standing up from the chair. They told me to scrub the floor or get out. So, I am getting out. And I am taking the floor with me. Leaving Jareth's cold, air-conditioned office, I stepped out into the warm morning sun. For the first time in my entire adult life, I felt physically lighter. The heavy, suffocating chains of familial obligation had been shattered. The wheels of their destruction were officially in motion. But I knew the reality of family drama. I needed a secure escape route. I could not be in this city, or even this country, when the financial bombs started detonating. The relentless harassment, the emotional guilt-tripping, the flying monkeys coming out of the woodwork to shame me into submission. I refused to stick around to endure any of it. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, locked the doors, and dialed an international phone number. It rang 3 times before a bright, cheerful voice answered through the static. Blythe. My God, it has been way too long. Please don't tell me you are just calling to check on the performance of my investment portfolio. Tamsin laughed warmly. Tamsin was my fiercely loyal best friend from our university days. She was incredibly independent and had packed up her life and moved to Portugal 5 years ago to escape the relentless corporate American grind. She now lived in a beautiful, rustic stone cottage right by the sea, spending her days painting watercolors and drinking local wine. More importantly, she was the only person outside of Jareth who truly understood the dark depth of Una's toxic abuse. For years, Tamsin had begged me to cut my mother and sister off, watching them drain my spirit. I need a massive favor, Tam, I said, my voice finally cracking just a little for the first time since the horrific dinner party. I did it. I finally pulled the plug on them. There was a heavy, stunned pause on the other end of the line. The background noise of seagulls and ocean waves seemed to quiet down. Tell me everything. Right now. I poured it all out. The spilled red wine, the dirty rag hitting my chest, the cruel command to scrub the floors in front of our entire family. I told her about the devastating discovery of the stolen identity and the maxed-out credit card used for Veda's vanity. I told her about the emergency meeting with Jareth, the frozen accounts, and the eviction notice being drafted by a legal team as we spoke. Blythe, Tamsin said, her voice thick with raw emotion and fierce protectiveness. You are not crazy. They're monsters. I am so incredibly sorry it took this sickening level of disrespect for the dam to finally break, but I am so damn proud of you for finally standing up and fighting back. You owe those people nothing. Hearing another human being validate my twisted reality was like taking a deep breath of pure oxygen after drowning underwater for 35 years. I can't be here when it all falls apart, Tam. When Una realizes she is broke and facing fraud charges, she will hunt me down. I need to disappear completely. The small guest cottage right next to my house is currently empty. It has a stunning view of the ocean, a small kitchen, and zero cell phone reception unless you walk up the big hill. It is yours for as long as you need it. Pack a bag, get on the next plane, and come home, she said without a single moment of hesitation. By that afternoon, my international flight to Lisbon was booked. I spent the next 48 hours moving like an efficient, silent ghost through the remains of my own life. I drove my reliable sedan to a local dealership down the street, negotiated a ruthless price, and sold it for a quick cash wire transfer. I packed exactly 2 large suitcases with my most essential, durable clothing, my encrypted work laptop, and a few small sentimental items that belonged to my late father. Everything else in the apartment, the cheap generic furniture, the everyday dishes, the television, I left behind without a second thought. I called my building landlord, paid the exorbitant penalty fee to break my apartment lease early, and handed over the keys. During those frantic 48 hours of packing and erasing my existence, my cell phone remained dead silent. Una had not called me. Veda had not sent a single text message. They were intentionally giving me the silent treatment, a classic manipulative tactic. They were sitting in their stolen luxury mansion, waiting eagerly for me to crack under the intense pressure of their displeasure, expecting me to crawl back on my knees to beg for their forgiveness. The absolute, staggering arrogance of their silence fueled my determination even more. They thought they were punishing me. They thought they were teaching me a harsh lesson about obedience. They had no idea they were giving me the exact, uninterrupted head start I needed to vanish completely off the face of the earth. It was my final morning in the United States. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the city. My 2 packed bags were sitting by the door of my empty, echoing apartment. My long flight to Lisbon departed in exactly 5 hours. But there was one last, crucial thing I needed to do. One final, symbolic visit to close the agonizing chapter of my old life forever. I called an Uber and took a ride up into the wealthy, winding hills, pulling up to the massive, imposing iron security gates of the estate I owned, the exact estate my mother shamelessly paraded to her friends as her own. I knew their daily schedule perfectly. Una had a standing, prepaid appointment at a luxury day spa every Tuesday morning, and Veda would be at her failing, hemorrhaging boutique, pretending to work while taking endless selfies in the mirror for social media. The massive house would be completely empty. I keyed in the complex security code at the gate, a code for a system that I paid the expensive monthly monitoring fee for, and stepped through the grand, custom mahogany double doors. The silence of the massive, echoing house was suffocating. I walked slowly through the grand foyer, stepping carefully over a pair of Veda's muddy, $1,000 designer boots that she had left carelessly in the exact middle of the imported silk rug. I moved into the sprawling gourmet kitchen. It was an absolute disaster zone. Used, lipstick-stained wine glasses cluttered the massive marble island. Crusty, food-covered plates were stacked precariously high in the deep copper sink. A sticky, spreading pool of spilled orange juice was drying into the grout on the floor near the oversized luxury refrigerator. This was exactly what they expected me to come back for. They intentionally left the horrible mess, assuming their dutiful, broken daughter would show up, apologize profusely for ruining their dinner party 2 nights ago, and quietly wash their dirty dishes as an act of pathetic penance. For 35 agonizing years, I would have automatically rolled up my sleeves, found a sponge, and started scrubbing, desperate to earn a fake smile or a hollow word of thanks that would never, ever come. Not today. I walked over to the center of the marble island, being very careful not to step in the sticky juice on the floor. I reached into my leather purse and pulled out the heavy brass spare key they had given me years ago. They gave it to me with strict, condescending instructions to only use it when I needed to come over and feed their purebred dogs or let the plumbers in to fix a leak. I placed the brass key directly in the center of the clean marble. Next to it, I placed a small, bright yellow sticky note. I didn't write a long, emotional letter detailing my trauma. I didn't list my endless grievances or demand a tearful apology. I simply wrote, "Clean your own floors. The locks are being changed next week. The house is sold. Take care." Blythe, I looked at the yellow note for a long time. It felt almost too small, too physically insignificant to carry the massive weight of a lifetime of financial and emotional abuse. But as I turned my back on the filthy kitchen and walked out the front door, pulling it shut behind me with a heavy, final click, a massive, crushing weight lifted off my chest. I climbed back into the waiting Uber. "To the international terminal at the airport, please," I told the driver, rolling down the window to feel the morning breeze. As the car wound its way down the steep hillside, leaving the estate behind forever, my cell phone vibrated violently in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from Una. "We're out of sparkling water. Pick some up on your way over to clean the kitchen. And bring cash. Veda needs to pay the pool boy." I stared at the glowing screen. A slow, genuine, radiant smile spread across my face. I didn't reply to her demand. I didn't send an angry paragraph. I simply powered down the phone, popped the back casing open, and snapped the tiny SIM card in half with my thumb, letting the broken plastic pieces fall into the bottom of my purse. They were no longer my problem. The parasite had been detached. If you are enjoying this story of silent, brutal compliance and ultimate family drama, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You will not want to miss what happens when the financial wrecking ball finally swings, because the fallout is absolute chaos. The flight across the Atlantic Ocean felt less like a simple journey and more like a rebirth. I slept for 8 straight hours, a deep, dreamless sleep that I had not experienced since I was a small child. When the plane finally descended through the clouds and the wheels touched down on the tarmac in Lisbon, a wave of profound relief washed over my tired bones. The air outside the airport smelled like salt water and fresh pastry. Tamsin was waiting for me right outside the arrivals terminal, leaning against a rented car with a bright, welcoming smile. We did not exchange any dramatic words. We just hugged. It was a tight, fierce embrace that told me I was finally safe. She drove us out of the bustling city and along the stunning, rugged coastline. The ocean sparkled like crushed diamonds under the late afternoon sun. We arrived at her property, a breathtaking piece of land perched on a small cliff. The guest cottage was perfect. It had thick stone walls, a small terracotta roof, and windows that opened directly toward the crashing waves. For the very first time in my 35 years of existence, I had a space that belonged solely to me. There were no demands. There was no screaming. There was just the gentle sound of the wind. I unpacked my 2 suitcases, arranged my few belongings, and sat on the wooden porch with a glass of crisp local wine. I took a deep breath, letting the ocean air fill my lungs. While I was watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, the calendar slowly ticked over. It was the first day of the month back in the United States. The first of the month was always a chaotic, stressful day for my bank accounts. But today, my accounts were empty, frozen, or relocated to offshore security. The financial dominoes began to fall in a spectacular, cascading sequence of disaster. Because I had snapped my old SIM card in half, I did not witness the initial explosion in real time. But Jareth, my ruthless wealth manager, sent me a detailed, encrypted email summarizing the beautiful catastrophe. I opened my laptop on the porch and read his message while sipping my wine. At exactly 8 in the morning, the automated property tax payment for the luxury estate was rejected due to a closed account. 1 hour later, the massive automatic transfer I usually sent to Una's checking account failed to process. By noon, Veda was walking into her favorite high-end spa for a premium facial and massage. According to the furious email Una had sent to Jareth demanding answers, Veda tried to hand the receptionist her black credit card. The machine beeped, flashing a declined message. She tried another card. Declined. She tried a third card, the one linked directly to her boutique's business account. Declined. Veda was forced to call her mother in tears, standing in the lobby of a luxury spa, unable to pay for her $300 seaweed wrap. But the real masterpiece of the day happened at 2 in the afternoon. Una had leased a brand-new, top-of-the-line Mercedes SUV 6 months prior, fully expecting me to quietly absorb the monthly payments. When the automatic withdrawal bounced, the dealership's aggressive finance department wasted zero time. They had been trying to contact Una all morning regarding the failed payment and her suddenly frozen credit profile. Since Una ignored unknown numbers, assuming she was untouchable, the dealership sent a recovery team. Jareth's email described the scene based on a frantic, screaming voicemail Una had left on his office answering machine. She had been hosting 3 of her wealthy country club friends for an afternoon tea on the patio of the estate. Right in the middle of her boasting about her fabulous life, a heavy tow truck backed into the long, sweeping driveway. 2 men in neon vests hopped out, verified the vehicle identification number, and swiftly hooked the pristine white Mercedes to their winch. Una ran out of the house in her silk robe, screaming at the men, threatening to call the police, and demanding they unhook her vehicle. The tow truck driver calmly handed her a printed notice of default, citing massive financial irregularities and a revoked payment method. He tipped his hat and drove away, pulling her status symbol down the street while her wealthy friends watched the entire humiliating spectacle in stunned silence from the patio. I leaned back in my wooden chair, the sound of the Portuguese waves washing over me. The contrast was almost poetic. They were suffocating in a swamp of their own making, panicking over declined cards and repossessed cars, while I was sitting thousands of miles away, tasting freedom. The illusion of their elite status was shattering into a million sharp pieces. And the best part was, they still had no idea just how deep the hole they were standing in truly was. 3 days passed in absolute tranquility. I bought a local prepaid phone to stay in contact with Tamsin and Jareth, ignoring everything else. I spent my mornings walking along the sandy cliffs and my afternoons exploring the small fishing village nearby. But family trauma is a stubborn beast. It does not just lay down and die quietly. When a narcissist loses their primary source of fuel, they do not self-reflect. They lash out. They recruit allies. They send out their flying monkeys to drag the victim back into the cage. For my mother, her favorite flying monkey was Aunt Maeve. Aunt Maeve was Una's older sister. She lived 3 states away and prided herself on being the moral compass of our extended family. She was loud, fiercely opinionated, and always ready to deliver a harsh lecture about family loyalty. Una knew she could not reach me, so she weaponized Maeve. I received an email from my old personal account. It was a forwarded voice message from Aunt Maeve, sent by a cousin who thought I should hear it. I hesitated for a moment before hitting play. Maeve's voice blasted through the laptop speakers, dripping with righteous fury and aggressive disappointment. Blythe, I do not know where you are hiding, but you need to call your mother this instant. What is wrong with you? She is crying hysterically. You left her and your sister with no money, you shut off the bank accounts, and you abandoned them over a tiny argument at dinner. Family is family. You do not just turn your back on your mother when she is struggling. You are acting like a spoiled, selfish brat. Call me back right now and fix this mess before you ruin your mother's health. A few years ago, a message like that would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and panic. I would have scrambled to explain myself, apologizing and begging for understanding. Not anymore. I calmly opened a new email draft. I typed in Aunt Maeve's email address. I did not write a long, defensive paragraph. I did not apologize. Instead, I attached 3 specific files. The first file was a comprehensive, certified financial spreadsheet covering the last 10 years. It detailed every single dollar I had transferred to Una and Veda. It showed the property taxes, the luxury car leases, the utility bills, the boutique bailouts, and the endless monthly allowances. The grand total highlighted at the bottom was a staggering $750,000. The second file was the official police report Jareth had filed regarding the credit card fraud. The third file was a high-resolution scan of the forged signature on the credit application, placed side by side with Una's actual signature from a past legal document. It was an undeniable match. I added a single sentence to the body of the email. Aunt Maeve, please review the attached files before you ever speak to me about family loyalty again. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop and went for a long walk on the beach, letting the salty breeze clear my mind. I didn't have to wait long for the explosion. 2 hours later, my prepaid phone buzzed with an incoming international call. It was Jareth. I answered, the sound of seagulls echoing in the background. You really lit the match on that one, Blythe, Jareth chuckled, his voice sounding entirely too amused for a professional attorney. What happened? I asked, a small smile playing on my lips. Aunt Maeve happened, Jareth replied. She apparently opened your email while she was sitting in a restaurant with her husband. According to your cousin, Maeve took one look at the total amount of money you have been giving them, and she nearly choked on her water. But the credit card fraud is what pushed her over the edge. I walked closer to the water, letting the foam touch my bare feet. Did she call Una? Oh, she did more than call, Jareth said. She initiated a massive group video chat with the entire extended family. She confronted Una in front of everyone. Una tried to play the victim, claiming you owed her that money for raising you, and that the credit card was just a misunderstanding. Maeve lost her mind. She called Una a parasite. She told the entire family that Una committed a felony and that Veda is a useless freeloader. The family is tearing itself apart. Half of them are blocking Una's number. The flying monkeys just turned around and attacked the Wicked Witch. A profound sense of justice settled in my chest. For decades, Una had controlled the family narrative. She painted me as the distant, ungrateful daughter while playing the role of the self-sacrificing mother. In one single email, I had shattered her precious mask. The truth was out in the open, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. Thank you, Jareth, I said softly. Don't thank me yet, he replied, his tone shifting back to serious business. Veda is escalating things on her end. She is taking the fight public. The modern battlefield of family warfare is often fought on social media. Veda, having lost her unlimited funding and her luxury spa privileges, decided to play the only card she had left. She played the victim. That evening, Tamsin poured us both a generous glass of wine and set her phone on the wooden table between us. You need to see this, Tamsin said, shaking her head in utter disgust. Veda went live on Instagram an hour ago. I stared at the screen. Veda was sitting on the floor of the massive estate, looking strategically disheveled. She wore no makeup, and the lighting was purposely dimmed to cast dramatic shadows across her face. She was crying real, heavy tears, speaking directly to her thousands of followers. I just need to speak my truth, Veda sobbed into the camera, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of a designer sweater. My sister has always been deeply jealous of me. I don't know why, but she has this toxic need to control my family. She recently snapped and decided to financially abuse my mother and me. She locked us out of our own bank accounts. She is trying to destroy my small business, my boutique, just out of pure spite. I am terrified we are going to end up on the streets. Please, if anyone knows a good lawyer who deals with financial abuse, send them my way. I watched the screen, my expression blank. Hundreds of comments were flooding in, offering prayers, sending love, and calling me a monster. Veda was spinning a masterful web of lies, banking on the fact that I never used social media and would never defend myself publicly. She wanted to humiliate me into surrendering. She wanted the public pressure to break my resolve. I looked up at Tamsin. She really thinks she is the victim. She is delusional, Tamsin scoffed, reaching to turn off the video. Do you want Jareth to send a cease and desist letter? No, I said, a slow, calculated plan forming in my mind. I cease and desist is a warning. I don't do warnings anymore. Tell Jareth to execute Phase 3. Drop the hammer. Phase 3 was the ultimate revelation. It was the truth Veda had hidden from everyone, including her wealthy, aristocratic fiancé, Preston. The next morning in the United States, Jareth, acting as my official legal representative, released a carefully worded, fully documented public statement on his firm's website, tagging Veda's boutique business page. The statement was a masterpiece of legal precision. It did not use emotional language. It relied entirely on brutal, verifiable facts. The statement clarified that I was not financially abusing anyone. It revealed that I was, in fact, the sole financial sponsor of Veda's failing boutique. Jareth attached the public business registration documents showing my name as the primary investor and guarantor. He then released a formal notice stating that my LLC was officially withdrawing all financial backing and pulling the lease guarantee for the boutique's expensive downtown storefront due to continuous, massive profit losses over 3 years. The truth was out. Veda was not a brilliant, self-made entrepreneur. She was a massive financial failure who had been secretly propped up by the sister she constantly publicly mocked. But the final, crushing blow came an hour later. Una and Veda were sitting in the living room of the estate, frantically trying to delete the flood of negative comments pouring onto Veda's business page, when the heavy front doorbell rang. Una opened the door to find a sharp-looking man in a tailored suit holding a thick manila folder, flanked by a local sheriff's deputy. It was the representative for the cash buyer who had purchased the estate from my LLC. The sale had officially cleared escrow that morning. The man handed Una the folder. Una and Veda? I represent the new legal owner of this property. Enclosed is your formal 30-day notice to vacate the premises. The new owner plans to demolish this structure to build a modern compound. You have exactly 1 month to remove your belongings, or they will be seized and disposed of. Jareth told me later that Una fainted right there in the foyer. She literally collapsed onto the expensive rug, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of her ruined life. Veda started screaming at the men, insisting it was a mistake, insisting they had a long-term lease. The deputy calmly informed her that their month-to-month lease had been legally terminated by the previous owner, and they had 0 legal grounds to stay. They had 30 days to pack up their entire luxurious life. And they had no money to hire movers. They had no money for a security deposit on a new place. They had nothing. The dominoes had not just fallen. They had crushed the entire foundation. But there was one final string left to snap. I checked my email again, wondering how Preston, Veda's snobby fiancé, was handling the sudden revelation that his beautiful, successful bride-to-be was actually broke, facing eviction, and deeply in debt. I knew Preston's family. They cared about wealth, status, and pedigree above all else. This was going to be the ultimate test of their profound love. The answer regarding Preston's loyalty arrived 2 days later, delivered through the reliable gossip mill of Aunt Maeve, who had suddenly become my biggest informant. Preston did not just cancel the wedding. He vanished. The moment Jareth's public statement hit the internet, exposing Veda's boutique as a massive, debt-ridden failure, Preston's wealthy parents intervened. They ordered a quiet background check on Una and Veda. What they found terrified them. They discovered the massive $50,000 credit card fraud investigation currently hovering over Una's head. They saw the eviction notice filed in the county records. They realized that the glamorous, rich family Veda claimed to come from was nothing more than a hollow, rotting illusion funded by a sister she had driven away. Preston drove to the estate that evening. According to the neighbors who watched the drama unfold from their manicured lawns, it was a spectacular shouting match. Preston stood on the driveway, demanding his expensive diamond engagement ring back. Veda was sobbing, clinging to his arm, begging him to listen to her side of the story. She blamed me, of course. She said I had set her up. But Preston was cold and indifferent. He pried her fingers off his designer jacket, retrieved the ring, got into his Porsche, and drove away without looking back. The wedding was off. The boutique was locked down by the commercial landlord the very next morning for unpaid rent. The fairy tale was dead. For the next 28 days, Una and Veda lived in a state of absolute, chaotic panic. The reality of their situation finally set in, and it was brutal. Without my bank account to cushion their fall, they had to face the real world. They tried to secure loans, but Una's credit was frozen due to the fraud investigation, and Veda had zero verifiable income. They tried to ask their wealthy country club friends for help, but those friends vanished into thin air the moment the rumors of fraud and eviction began circulating. High society does not tolerate the stench of poverty and scandal. They were entirely alone. On the 30th day, the deadline to vacate the estate arrived. Jareth sent an associate to monitor the property handover. He later sent me a detailed report that felt better than any therapy session I had ever attended. Because they could not afford professional movers, Una and Veda had to rent a cheap, dented moving truck. The two women, who had never lifted anything heavier than a champagne flute, spent 3 agonizing days dragging heavy boxes, furniture, and trash bags full of designer clothes out of the mansion. Their manicures were ruined. They were sweating, crying, and fighting bitterly with each other the entire time. Una blamed Veda for spending too much money. Veda blamed Una for stealing my identity and ruining everything. The golden child and the narcissistic mother were finally turning their venom on each other. They moved into a tiny, 2-bedroom apartment on the gritty outskirts of the city. The building had stained carpets, flickering hallway lights, and no security gate. It was the exact type of place Una used to mock when driving past. Now it was her permanent reality. But the hardest pill for them to swallow was not the loss of the mansion or the cars. It was the loss of their servant. Me. For the first time in their adult lives, they had to clean up their own mess. There was no maid service. There was no Blythe to scrub the floors, wash the dishes, or take out the overflowing trash. The tiny apartment quickly became a cluttered, dirty nightmare. They were drowning in boxes they did not know how to unpack, living on cheap takeout food they could barely afford, and facing the terrifying prospect of finding actual minimum wage jobs just to keep the lights on. Una was also living under the constant, looming threat of federal charges. The bank's fraud department was building a solid case against her. The only thing keeping her out of handcuffs was the slow pace of the legal system. They had lost the war. Their castle made of sand had washed away, leaving them stranded on a cold, barren beach. They were broken, humiliated, and desperate. And in their desperation, they did the only thing they knew how to do. They tried to crawl back. 6 months passed. The transition from winter to spring in Portugal was breathtaking. The coastal hills turned a vibrant, lush green, and the ocean seemed to calm down, reflecting the bright blue sky. My life had settled into a peaceful, rewarding rhythm. I managed my investments remotely for a few hours a day, painted watercolors with Tamsin in the afternoons, and learned how to cook fresh seafood. The tension in my jaw, a constant companion for 35 years, had completely melted away. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying a cup of strong black coffee, when my prepaid phone rang. The screen displayed an unknown international number. I knew who it was. I had been expecting this call for months. I took a slow sip of my coffee, let it ring 3 more times to establish control, and finally pressed the green button. "Hello," I said, my voice calm, smooth, and entirely unbothered. "Blythe." The voice on the other end was trembling, weak, and pathetic. It was Una. She sounded like she had aged 20 years in 6 months. There was no arrogance left in her tone. There was no demanding edge. She sounded terrified. "Hello, Una," I replied, deliberately using her first name instead of calling her mom. I heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a pathetic, wavering sob. "Oh, Blythe. Please. Please don't hang up. I am begging you." I leaned back in my chair, resting my feet on the wooden railing. "I'm listening. Make it quick. I have a painting class in 20 minutes. "I am so sorry," she wept, the tears sounding thick and genuine, though I knew the tears were for her own suffering, not for the pain she caused me. "I am so sorry for everything. I was wrong. I was foolish. We are living in a nightmare, Blythe. This apartment is awful. Veda is working at a grocery store, and she hates me. The bank is threatening to press formal charges against me for the credit card. I could go to jail. I am an old woman. I can't go to jail. Please, Blythe. You have to help us. I will do whatever you want. I will get on my knees and beg. We are family. You have to forgive me. I listened to her desperate pleas, analyzing the words. She didn't mention the 35 years of emotional neglect. She didn't mention the constant humiliation, or the financial bleeding, or the dinner party. She only cared about her current predicament. She wanted her savior back. She wanted her ATM back. She was not offering a true apology. She was offering a transaction to save her own skin. I held absolute, undeniable power in this dynamic now. The tables hadn't just turned. I had flipped the entire table over and walked out of the room. I felt no anger. I felt no pity. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. Are you finished? I asked quietly when her sobbing finally paused for breath. Blythe, please, she whispered. Save us. Let me explain something to you very clearly, I said, my voice steady and firm, carrying across the miles of ocean between us. Family is supposed to be a safe harbor. Family is supposed to support each other. Family does not steal $50,000 in identity fraud to buy designer purses. Family does not throw dirty rags at each other in front of guests. Family does not force their own flesh and blood to scrub floors in humiliation. I was stressed, she cried out, trying to find an excuse. I didn't mean it. You meant every single word, Una. You loved the power, I replied smoothly. You loved feeling superior. You built an entire fake life on my back, and the moment I stood up, your world collapsed. That is not my fault. That is gravity. I will go to prison, she shrieked, panic overtaking her. Then you should hire a public defender and negotiate a plea deal, I advised her, as if I were discussing the weather. The apartment you are in right now is small, yes? But it is exactly what you can afford. It is a place for you and Veda to finally learn how to live like responsible, independent adults. Consider it a late life lesson. You are a monster, she suddenly screamed, her true, toxic nature violently breaking through the fragile mask of the weeping mother. You cold, ungrateful brat. After everything I did for you. A genuine smile touched my lips. There she was. The real Una. Clean your own floors, Una. Do not call this number again. I pulled the phone away from my ear, ignoring her hysterical screaming, and pressed the red button to end the call. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound in the world. I blocked the number, set the phone on the table, and took another peaceful sip of my coffee. The power shift was permanent. The war was officially over, and I had won the only prize that mattered, my freedom. The morning sun climbed higher into the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the Portuguese coastline. I stood up from my chair, stretched my arms, and walked over to the wooden easel I had set up on the far corner of the balcony. A blank canvas waited for me, crisp and full of infinite possibilities. I picked up a thin brush, dipped it into a pool of vibrant blue watercolor paint, and dragged it smoothly across the thick paper, capturing the exact shade of the ocean below. For the majority of my life, I believed that money was just a tool to buy love. I thought that if I paid enough bills, bought enough cars, and funded enough lavish dinners, I would eventually earn a place in my mother's heart. I thought my wealth was a heavy anchor, chaining me to a family that secretly despised me. But as I painted the horizon, I realized the profound truth. Money did not buy their love, because they were entirely incapable of loving anyone but themselves. Instead, my money bought something infinitely more valuable. It bought my escape. It bought the heavy steel doors I slammed shut between their toxicity and my peace of mind. It bought this beautiful cottage, the sound of these crashing waves, and the incredible privilege of waking up every single morning knowing that nobody was going to demand a piece of my soul. I am 35 years old. I am wealthy, I am healthy, and for the first time in my existence, I am truly, deeply happy. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I will stay in Portugal forever. Maybe I will travel the world. But whatever I choose to do, the choice belongs entirely to me. I am no longer the invisible scapegoat. I am the author of my own life. There are still days when the ghosts of my past try to creep into my mind. Sometimes, I catch a scent of expensive red wine, and my chest tightens for a brief second. But then I look at the ocean, take a deep breath of salty air, and remind myself of the brutal, necessary truth. Some relationships are toxic waste. You cannot clean them. You cannot fix them. You can only walk away and build a new life far from the radiation zone. Many of my extended relatives, the flying monkeys who still circle the wreckage of Una's life, continue to whisper behind my back. They tell everyone who will listen that I am a cruel, heartless daughter. They say that pushing my own mother and sister out onto the streets, leaving them entirely white-knuckled and broke, was a step too far. They believe that no matter the abuse, family should always be forgiven. So, I turn to you. Do you think I went too far? Was I too ruthless in cutting them off so violently, selling the house out from under them, and letting the fraud charges stick? Or did they get exactly what they deserved after 35 years of taking advantage of my kindness? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, because I truly want to hear your perspective. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. If you felt a sense of satisfaction from this ultimate revenge, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another dramatic, crazy story. Until next time, remember to know your worth, protect your peace, and never let anyone treat you like a servant in your own life.